מה טובו עליך יעקב משכנותיך ישראל מה טובו עליך יעקב משכנותיך
Shabbat Shalom. It's an honor to, behalf of Bet David in Santon, Bet David Menorah, Pretoria and Bet David in Durban, to welcome everybody from around the world to our Erev Shabbat service. Whether you're watching online or in our synagogue, we hope that you'll find these services meaningful and enriching. Please note the recordings of all our Shabbat and festival services are available to be viewed on our YouTube. Tonight the candles will be lit by our master teacher, Diane McCall.
In the spirit of our ancient tradition, which unites and sanctifies the house of Israel in all lands and ages, we welcome the Shabbat by kindling these lights. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Amen. We now call on Gail to give us some insights into what thoughts there are for this week.
Regarding both Parashat Tazria of last week and Parashat Metzorah for this week, I was given this insight by a cousin of mine who studies in a yeshiva in Jerusalem. In the times of the Mishkan, if a Jew sinned, God would bring him to do teshuvah by causing disease to be found on the bricks of his house. If he continued to sin, he would find disease on his clothes. If he still continued to sin, disease would break out on his body. This shows God's patience, mercy, and love. He waits for the sinner to repent before he punishes him.
We now have the choir who are going to introduce the Kabbalat Service on page 130 in the Siddur. There's also an online version of this, page 130.
Lechu
now turn to the second psalm for this evening, which is on page 132, and will be read by Fiona.
Sing to God a new song. Sing to God all the earth. Sing to God, bless God's name. Proclaim God's victory day after day. Tell of God's glory among the nations, God's wondrous deeds among all peoples. For the Eternal One is great and much acclaimed. God is held in awe by all divine beings. All the gods of the peoples are mere idols. But the Eternal One made the heavens. Glory and majesty are before God. Strength and splendor are in God's temple. Let the heavens rejoice and the earth exult. Let the sea and all within it thunder. The fields and everything in them exult. Then shall all the trees of the forest shout for joy at the presence of the Eternal One. For God is coming to rule the earth. God will rule the world justly and its people in faithfulness.
On the bottom of page 132, Adonai Malach Tagel Haaretz Yismuchu Yim Rabim Anan V'Arafel Tzvivav Tzedek Mishpat Mechon Kiso Oavei Adonai Sinura Shomer Nafshot Chasidav Miyad Rushaim Yatzilem Or Zarua LaTzadik Ulrishlei Leiv Simcha Simchu Tzadikim Badonai V'Hodu Lezecher Kodsho. On the bottom of page 133.
A psalm, sing to God a new song, for you have worked wonders. Your right hand, your holy arm, have won you victory. Eternal One, you have shown your victory, displayed your justice in the sight of the nations. You were mindful of your love and faithfulness towards the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth beheld the victory of our God.
We now turn to page 134, the third line down, and the choir will lead us through this.
Zamru Adonai Bechinor, 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 Vekol Zimra, Bachatzotzrot, Vekol Shofar, Shofar, Hariu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai. Zamru Adonai Bechinor, 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 Vekol Zimra, Bachatzotzrot, Vekol Shofar, Shofar, Hariu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai. Yiram hayam omlo, tevel veyosh veiva. Neharot yimchau chav yachad, harim yeranenu. Lifnei Adonai kiva kiva, Yishpot haaretz, Yishpot tevel betzedek, ve'amim b'meisharim. Yiram hayam omlo, tevel ve'yosh veiva. Neharot yimchau chav yachad, harim yeranenu.
Carrying on with the psalms that introduce us to the Shabbat and raise our spirits for the Shabbat, we now turn to page 135 for the Psalm 99.
God enthroned on cherubim is sovereign. Peoples tremble, the earth quakes. God is great in Zion and exalted above all peoples. They praise your name as great and awesome. God is holy. Mighty ruler who loves justice, it is you who established equity, you who worked righteous judgment in Jacob. Exalt the eternal our God, and bow down to God's footstool. God is holy. Exalt the eternal our God, and bow toward God's holy hill. For the eternal our God is holy.
We now turn to Psalm 29 on the top page, 136. Mizmor LeDavid, Havu Ladonai b'nei Elim, Havu Ladonai kavod voz, Havu Ladonai kavod shmo, Hishtachavu Ladonai b'hadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, El kavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, Kol Adonai b'koach, Kol Adonai b'hadar, Kol Adonai yeshaber arazim, Vayishaber Adonai et arazei halavanon, V'yarkidem k'mo egel, Levanon v'Sion k'mo ben reimim. Kol Adonai chosef l'chavodesh, Kol Adonai yechil midbar, Yechil Adonai midbar kadesh. Kol Adonai yecholel ayalot v'yachasov yarot, V'hechalo klo omer kavod. Adonai lamabul yashav, V'yeshev Adonai melech leolam. Adonai oz, la'amo yitein. Adonai yevarech, et amo b'shalom. God will bless his people with peace. We now turn to Lecha Dodi on page 138.
Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה.
שעמוד זרעון לדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
לשמו תפארת ולתפילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה.
לקראת שבת לאמור ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה, בראש מקדם לסוכה.
סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה.
התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך ומיורי, אורי, אורי, שירה ברי.
כבוד אדוני לך נגלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה.
בואי לשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצוהלה. טוב אמונה יבשרו לה.
בואי חלה, בואי חלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה כלה, פני שבת מקבלה בלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה.
The last of the religious poems, the Psalms that we say before Shabbat, is the Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbat, a psalm that was particularly titled, a psalm specially for this day, for Yom HaShabbat. That's on page 140. And the choir will lead us.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, מזמור שיר ליום השבת.
להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות. עלי עשות, עלי לומד, עלי היגיון וחינוך.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, מזמור שיר ליום השבת.
It's indeed good to praise God and sing hymns to his name most high. We now turn to the end of this section, and this is where we say the Kaddish on page 144. Kaddish is not only said for somebody who's passed away. Kaddish also marks the termination of sections of these services. And here's where we say a short Kaddish for the end of the Kabbalat Shabbat service. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, b'omad yivrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'v'zman kariv v'mru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah muvarach lalam ulomei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitrumam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shmei dikudsha brichu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran b'olma v'mru Amen. In the Kaddish, you'll see that a couple of lines are indented in the middle, and those are the lines that those people who are not saying Kaddish, but are listening to Kaddish, would chant together with the community. We now turn to page 146 for the Baruch, which the choir will lead us through. before we said the Baruch, there was a nigun, a melody, a wordless melody where you just say la 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 or things like that is very common, especially in the Hasidic community, and it permeates all parts of Judaism. There's a lovely story told about a town where they hadn't had a rabbi for a very, very long time, a familiar thing. And they all heard that there was going to be a great rabbi coming to their town, and they were going to have an evening with him. And they all had these questions that they wanted to ask, that as soon as he came, they were going to ask him these questions which had been on their mind for so long. When they got into the room with this great rabbi, I think that they were overawed by his presence. And he said, any questions? And nobody wanted to stand up and volunteer and say, I'm troubled by this, or I'm troubled by that, or I don't understand this, or I don't understand that. And slowly the rabbi started humming a nigun, a wordless song, with the la-la-las, or whatever it is that fills in place of words. And slowly but surely, people in the audience, in the room there with him, who'd come gathered to ask their questions and to get advice and wisdom, started joining in for a while too. And then after a while, more and more of them joined in and became more and more engaging and rich and meaningful and deep. And when it was all over, after quite a long time, the rabbi looked up at them and said, answered all your questions? And he probably had. We now turn to page 149, where we read the beginning part of the Ma'ariv service. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chochma potech sharim, ובתבונה משנה עתים ומחליף את הזמנים ומסדר את הכוכבים בשמורותיהם ברקיע כרצונו. בורא יום ולילה, גולל אור מפני חושך וחושך מפני אור. המעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, El Chai V'Kayam Tamidim Lo Chalenu Lam Va'ed, ever living God, may you reign over us into eternity. Baruch Atah Adonai HaMa'ariv Aravim. The choir now going to lead us through the... Are there? Yes, Ahavat Olam on page 150.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta, al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shofteinu ufkunenu nasiach bechukecha, v'nishmach b'divrei Toratecha, u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed, ki em chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, u'vahem negei yomam v'layla, negei yomam v'layla, ve'ahavatecha, al tasim imenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael.
Turn to page 152 for a critical, important meditation. This is a meditation, the Shema, which is said regularly 2-3 times a day. And in it, we focus on the fact that God is one. It's easy to think of God as being one, or God being the only one, but when you try and get your mind around the idea of this God is a unity, and that everything in the world is part of God. Jews are panentheists, which means that they believe that the whole world is godly, but that God is also above the world. When we think of the world as being one, we are connected to the world, all parts of it, in ways that are inexplicable, ways that are very deep and very profound, and that other people's suffering is our suffering, and other people's concerns are our concerns, and their joys are our joys. And this is our planet, and this is our world. And we remind ourselves of that a couple of times every day, that God is one, and we are actually dwelling. It's not da lifnei mi ata made, know before whom you stand. It's probably easier to say and easier to understand to say da betoch mi ata made, know within whom you stand. Let's say this right together.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Top of page 154. Let's read this together in the Hebrew. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol modecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשופתך ובקומך, וקשרתם מאוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. And you should teach them to people, to your children, to everybody you meet, when you're walking down the way, when you're walking down the streets, when you're in your home, when you're outside, by your deportment, you teach other people, and other people learn from you, irrespective of what your deportment is. We now turn to the bottom of page 155. Leman tizguru v'asitem ekol mitzvotai v'item kodoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher aseti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem emet. We end off by saying that God is the one who brought us out of the land of Egypt to be our God. In there, some very deep philosophical thoughts. We now turn to page 156. The choir will now lead us through Mi Chamocha on the top of page 158.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef ele, nora tehilot osef ele. Malchutcha ra'u v'anecha, pokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, zeli Adonai imloch le'olam.
Emar, Kifada Adonai et Yaakov, Ugalo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Gaal Yisrael.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom, L'shalom, Ve'amidenu Malkeinu L'chaim, Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom, L'shalom, Ve'amidenu Malkeinu L'chaim, Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha. Amen.
Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and rise up in peace, our sovereign, and we rise up to renewed life. We now turn to the page 162, and we're going to have the choir lead us through V'shamru.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני
את השמיים ואת הארץ ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
We now turn to the Tefillah, the central meditation of our Siddur, almost of every service. If you've attended our morning services, on occasions we've read the 10 things that we get merit for in this world, and we also get merit in the world to come. In other words, it's good for us now, very good for us now, and it will last longer than we last. One of those things is iyun b'tfilah, focusing deeply and intently on doing tefillot, doing the meditations. This is the meditation. So I invite you, when we're saying this meditation, whether you're saying it in Hebrew or English, try not to let your mind wander at all. Focus all your attention on the words in front of you, whether you're reading them in Hebrew or in English. Don't let your mind wander on anything else. The very act of being able to discipline your mind so that you focus on the tefillah, not only will you get the benefits of the intellectual and spiritual values that you learn in the tefillot, but it's also very, very good mind training. So let's stand. We take 3 steps backwards before we begin, getting ourselves ready to walk into the presence of God, where we're going to do the tefillah, and we begin with our choir leading us through the Amidah.
Adonai, Sefatai Tiftachu, Fiat Yiteinatecha. Adonai, Sefatai Tiftachu, Fiat Yiteinatecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarai, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah.
האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה.
מלך עושה ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל, אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים, ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך, בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, נאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. We're at the top of page 170. אתה קדוש ושמך הקדוש, וקדושים בכל יום מעלוך הסלע, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. 172, and the choir will lead us through the Vaychulu.
ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם, ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי, ויקדש אותו, כי הוא שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו רוצה במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך, שבענו מטבעך ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעובדך באמת.
וטהר ליבנו, וטהר ליבנו, וטהר ליבנו לעובדך באמת. ותהל ליבנו, ותהל ליבנו, ותהל ליבנו ליובתך באמת. דה 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 הוי! דה 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 ותהל ליבנו, ותהל ליבנו, ותהל ליבנו ליובתך באמת. ותהל ליבנו, ותהל ליבנו, ותהל ליבנו ליובתך באמת.
Page 174, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, B'amcha Yisrael, Tfilatam ba'ava taqabel, Tehil ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha, El karov l'chol karav, Pnei levadecha v'chonenu, Shfoch ruchacha aleinu, pour out your spirit upon us, V'techazena ineinu b'shuvcha l'tzion, b'rachamim. We now turn, I'd like you please to turn to page 257, not the next page, but 257. We're going to say the Modim, which is so beautifully put together on 257. Fiona's going to read the English text, and I'd like us all please to join saying, Modim anachnu lach. We thank you, God, for this.
For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations.
Modim anachnu lach.
For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons.
Modim anachnu lach.
For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements.
Modim anachnu lach.
For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression.
Modim anachnu lach.
For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared.
Modim anachnu lach.
For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom.
Modim anachnu lach.
For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose.
Modim anachnu lach.
We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Blessed are you, Eternal One. Your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving.
We turn back to page 178. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Lolam. Grant abundant peace to Israel, your people, forever. For you are the sovereign God of all peace. May it be pleasing to you to bless your people Israel in every season, every moment, with your peace. Baruch atah Adonai hamorech et amo Yisrael v'et kol yoshvei tevel, and all inhabitants of the world, bashalom. We now turn to the silent prayer. This is where prayer comes in. This is real prayer. It's silent, it's quiet, it's very personalized, and it should come from whatever's inside you. If you feel that it's easier for you to follow a text, there's some very inspiring texts on page 180 and 181. Please read that. This is the point at which you can express what you need to express and ask for what you need to ask. Nothing, no prayer goes unanswered. No prayer goes unanswered. It may take a lot of praying, but no prayer goes unanswered. They said of Moses that he prayed to God 151 times, begging God to let him come into the land of Israel, until God said to him, enough, no more. Because he said if there'd been one more prayer, God would have relented and let him go into Israel. Whether that's true or not, but it's a wonderful way of our sages teaching us that you can bombard the gates of heaven with your prayers. Now's your chance.
אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע, ושפתיים מדבר ממה. ונמכר אלי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי. אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע, ושפתיים מדבר במה. ונמכר אלי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי. אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע, ושפתיים מדבר במה. ונמכר אלי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי. פתח ליבי, ושפתיים מדבר ממה. ונמכר אלי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי. אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע, ושפתיים מדבר ממה. ונמכר אלי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי.
יהיו לרצון אמרי פי, והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני, אדוני,
The last line that was sung so beautifully is Yehu leratzon imrei fi. God, let the words I'm saying, and the prayers I've just said, let them be favorable, prayers that you will respond to. And then it says V'hegyon libi lefanecha. In case it wasn't strong enough, just know the direction of my heart was in the right way, and listen to that too. V'hegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'goali. You're the rock on which I stand, and my Redeemer. We now have Gail, who's going to give us the right Torah sermon.
This week's parsha is Parashat Metzorah, and what I'm going to share with you tonight is based on the writings of Aharon Loshak, who's a writer, editor, and rabbi, and he lives in Brooklyn, New York. Now, last week's parsha described the signs of tzara'at, commonly mistranslated as leprosy, as I explained last week, whereby a person is afflicted by a skin disease, which in turn places him or her in a state of ritual impurity. This week's Torah portion begins by detailing how the recovered person is purified by the Kohen with a special procedure involving 2 birds, spring water in an earthen vessel, a piece of cedar wood, a scarlet thread, and a bundle of hyssop. This Torah portion includes a fascinating element in that a home can also be afflicted with tzara'at by the appearance of dark red or green patches on its walls. In a process lasting as long as 19 days, a Kohen determines if the house can be purified or whether it must be demolished. Such a pronunciation on one's home, and by extension one's sense of security, must have been devastating. Needless to say, there has been a great deal of commentary on this. The Talmud famously links tzara'at with lashon hara, or slander, or, as Maimonides explains, with overall negative speech. We should never underestimate the power of words. George Orwell enunciated the principle that if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Back to the torn-down house. Rashi, citing the Midrash, tells us something interesting. He says, "This is good news for the owners that legions of tzara'at will come upon them, because the Amorites had hidden away treasures of gold inside the walls of their houses during the entire 40 years that the Israelites were in the desert. And, through the legion, the owner will demolish the house and find the jewels." But does this make sense? On the one hand, the owners of the house are being punished for doing something wrong, and on the other, they're gaining from it. Why should speaking badly about someone be rewarded with the discovery of jewels on the walls of their home? Back to the importance of words. On a personal and community level here in South Africa, we are all too aware of hate speech. On a global level, we are also well aware of how tyrannical regimes have been buttressed by words, most notably in Germany, leading up to and during World War II, and now in Putin's Russia. But of course, words can, among many other things, also bring comfort to the sick, healing for the psyche, inspiration for the soul, and shine a light on the truth. When ideas are articulated in the right way, they can literally topple governments, change minds, and bring about tremendous goodness. Kabbalah supports this idea, explaining how words reach into the deepest part of the soul, how they burrow straight to the source of all ideas, and as such expose new depth, clarity, and force. Returning to the person with tzara'at on their home, yes, they may have sinned. Yes, they may have used words in a negative way. But the Torah doesn't simply stifle negative speech. That would be a missed opportunity. Rather, it impels us to harness the tremendous power of words in a positive and constructive way. In using words to expose something or to articulate a grand idea, it is like tearing down the walls of one's home and finding jewels. And I'd like to end by reading a poem by Yehuda Amichai called "Near the Wall of a House." Near the wall of a house, painted to look like stone, I saw visions of God. A sleepless night that gives others a headache gave me flowers, opening beautifully inside my brain. And he who was lost like a dog will be found like a human being and brought back home again. Love is not the last room. There are others after it, the whole length of the corridor that has no end. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Gail. Vintage Gail, absolutely superb. We now turn to the Kiddush, which is going to be read by Diane.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום השישי. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם. ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה. וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו. כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, v'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'charta, v'otanu kiddashta mikol ha'amin, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Amen. Chai. Thank you. We now turn to that portion of our service where we remember those. We first do our Len, which you'll find on page 586. 586, and the choir will lead us in the Alena.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה. השמיים ויסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים עמה, ושכינת זו, בגובי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו עינות, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום לשב אותה, לבביך. כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים עמך, ועל הארץ מתחתיה עוד.
Page 589.
Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. The Eternal One will reign forever and ever.
Now this brings us to the portion where we remember those who have passed away at this time and those who have passed away very recently. We're now on page 592.
When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or songs. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live on your eyes and not on your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away.
Tonight we remember from Bet David Santon, Ben Sion Walk, grandfather of Catherine Walk and Robert Walk, Rabbi Leo Abrami, past rabbi of Bet David and cousin of Rabbi Hillel Avidan, Harry Louis Levine, father of Dr. Arnold Levine, who passed away recently, Herman Rothenberg, husband of Doris and father of Michael, Colin and Joan, Kathleen May Firmo, mother of Rosemary, Jackie and David Firmo, Beit Menorah in Pretoria, Barney Joss, father of Alan Joss, Michael Rosen, father of Vienna Kleitman, who recently passed away, Zelna Tate, Margaret Abedi, and Essie Luntz, and from Beit David in Durban, Barbara Lipschitz, mother of Stanley Lipschitz, and Owen Griffith, mother of Nolene Simpson. Let us all recite the Kaddish together, which is found on page 598. And whilst you're saying Kaddish, please think of people who probably don't have anyone to say Kaddish for them, and have them in mind. If you can think of somebody specific, all the better. Otherwise, you can have a generalized thoughts, because there's so many people who don't have anyone to say Kaddish for them. Page 598.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, B'olma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'yomechon, B'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'al b'zman karev v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah v'rach la'lam lamei al-maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpahar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei kudsha brihu, Leila mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, Damiran b'olma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Thank you. The announcements. We thank everybody who's been watching online and those congregants who are here participating with us. The Youth Shabbat service tomorrow will begin at 8:30 in the synagogue. All children are invited to come to this youth-led service. Shachrit will begin at the usual time of 10 a.m. The Sisterhood of Temple David is making a special appeal for donations of jam and peanut butter for their children's feeding project in Alex. These donations can be brought to the synagogue, or you can alternatively make monetary donations using the Sisterhood's bank account, and the details are published weekly in the Adkan. We can now confirm that there will be an Erev Pesach service in the synagogue on Friday the 15th of April at 6 p.m. Temple Israel in Hillbrow has invited all Bet David congregants to a communal Seder at Temple Israel. For costs and other details, see this week's Adkan. Please contact the office should anyone need a lift to Hillbrow. On the first day of Pesach, that's Saturday the 16th at 10 o'clock, Rabbi David Benjamin, who was here before, South African, currently living in Israel, will be conducting this morning services from the synagogue. And we hope to see all our congregants in person, live and in person, to join us for this event. There will be a joint 7th Eve Pesach Zoom service put together by the South African Union of Progressive Jews on Thursday the 24th of April at 9:30 a.m. Please see the latest Adkan for the links. And we conclude with Adon Olam on page 625.
Adon Olam Hashem alav, B'terem kol etzim nivra, Ve'et nasa v'chetzo kol, Azai melech shemo nivra, Ve'acharei kiklot hakol, Levado yimloch nora, Ve'hu hayah ve'hu oved, Ve'hu yeh b'tifara, Ve'hu echad ve'en sheni, Lahamshil lo להכפירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמצרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי בצרה, והוא ניסי ומנוסי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו, אף כי רוחי בתשעת והעירה, ואם רוחי גוויעתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא.
We now call on Fiona, who's going to break bread for us to the Hamotzi.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Amen. That concludes our services. Thank you for joining us. And the choir will conclude with the Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Umvorach, Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Umvorach, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
Despite the fact that nobody's listening, a